You're listening to the Talon Talk Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's installment of the Talon Sports Talk Podcast. I'm Austin Speaker.
I'm Jaden Sarablo.
And I'm Mitch Courtney.
So let's get to it, guys. We're going to start with NHL, and the Buffalo Sabres just keep doing Buffalo things. Obviously, there's a whole thing going on with the Bills, obviously, that sometimes they can build it up, and the Sabres seem to saber it up as they blew a 3-0 lead to rival Philadelphia Flyers. Jaden, what did you take away from that game?
This past week, Buffalo's been very much like Buffalo. The Bills, you saw what happened to them against the Dolphins. We'll get to that later in the segment. Then the Sabres were leading the Flyers 3-0 going to the third period with their Anders Nilsson, his debut, and they blew it. The game went to a shootout, and ultimately the Sabres lost 4-3. The only thing you take away is they got a point from the game, but still you want to win there.
Yeah, I think that's a game that they had to have. Nielsen played his heart out there. He played great in net. And I think a big storyline for Bilesma's teams, even when he was with Pittsburgh, when Crosby was out or when Malkin was out, and it's the same situation in Buffalo now with Eichel and Kane out, that now he's having to get the best out of these players that aren't normally on the ice. And the Sabres are historically bad in overtime. We don't have Alesh Kotelik anymore to score on a backhand in a shootout, so they don't have that to fall back on. It's a loss that the Sabres couldn't afford to have,
Absolutely.
Even though it's early.
And if you go to the shootouts, you got skilled players like Reinhart and O'Reilly, and it hurts not having Jack Eichel out there because it's incredible to see what he can do with the way he cuts and what he can do with the puck. And this isn't the Sabres we're accustomed to seeing. We're used to seeing slow starts with strong finishes, and even if you lose, you start down 3-0 and then lose 3-2 or something like that. This one, you got out to a fast start. You're up 3-0. You got him exactly where you want him, pinned back against the wall, and the defense just wasn't there. They were sitting. They were lazy, and they couldn't recover from that.
Yeah. Philadelphia is a really good young team, and if you would have asked me 3 years ago if I would trade the Sabres roster and their position as far as prospects and draft position goes, I would say absolutely not. But now, a couple years in the future, Philadelphia is on the up and up, a surprise playoff berth last year, and they're looking good, and the Sabres are really going to have to battle to stay in the playoff race while their two stars are out.
Yeah. And they got that youth, like you're saying, but they also have Claude Giroux. Right. Doesn't get too much better than that. And Jacob Voracek, who added that shootout win against the Sabres. So, let's see what the Sabres can do tonight against the Wild, but they're losers of 3 straight, so they definitely need to get back on the winning side of things.
Absolutely. We've talked a couple times already in our segments is that they got it with Kane out, Eichel out. You need guys like Reinhart, like O'Reilly to really step up their game to really kind of keep them at least at 500, whenever that time is that they come back. But 3 straight, I know it's early, you got a lot of season left, but losing 3 straight at any point, it's not something you're proud of. There's not a whole lot of confidence going on in that locker room, the mental aspect of things. Now you've got to get rid of this losing streak somehow. What do they got to do against the Wild?
Like you're saying, players are stepping up. To everyone's surprise, Matty Molson put up 2 goals last game. When I was checking the starting lines, I saw Molson was the starting left winger on that first line, and I shook my head a little bit because, he had a very down year last year. But, he leads the team in goals. He had 2 against the Flyers. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, but we just need players like Matt Molson to continue to step up.
Yeah, and Molson's a guy who is always in the right position to score goals. Last year was a year which was sort of weird to see him in those spots, but he wasn't finishing any of his opportunities. He finished the season with 5 or 6 goals, I believe, and it was rough seeing him out there because it's a guy who can score 30 goals at the NHL level, and you saw him struggling so mightily last year. But with O'Reilly and Reinhart playing alongside him, and even a guy like Ennis who was sliding in with him, I think he's going to get back on that 30-goal pace.
Yeah, and to stick with the Eastern Conference, we're going to kind of go over a lot of that today. Canadiens and the Islanders the other day had a really good game.
Yeah, the Canadiens beat the Islanders 3-2 yesterday. Their newly acquired Shea Weber had a power play goal with 2:57 remaining in the third period. That ultimately was the game winner for them. Surprisingly, Canadiens are 6-0-1. I don't think anyone would have made that prediction to start the year, but they looked good against the Sabres in the first game of the year, and they're continuing that success.
Yeah, I think having Carey Price there is big. And bringing a guy like Shea Weber, who might not be as talented or as young as PK Subban was, but he's definitely more of a leader in the locker room, and I think that's important when you have guys like Mikhail Sergachev playing on that blue line for them. And they're fast on offense. They got Brendan Gallagher and a guy like Pacioretty who can put pucks in the back of the net, so they're set up for success here if Price can stay healthy.
Yeah, it's definitely a very well-balanced team they have there in Montreal.
Yeah, they're spoiled with a goalie like Price, and like you said, Mitch, as long as he can stay healthy, as long as he's still on the ice, even if he is kind of banged up, just him being out there, it's such an intimidation factor. You kind of like when, for the Rangers, when Ryan Lundqvist can kind of get banged up a little bit. Just having him out there is such a confidence boost that the offense can score a couple goals and get it going. And like you said, they got such a fast-paced offense. They can put the ball in the net anytime. The puck in the net, sorry.
And another surprise, we're saying how the Canadiens are 6-0-1. The Oilers are also 6-1. They're Cam Talbot had 34 saves last night in their victory over the Caps, and I think that's an even bigger surprise that the Oilers are 6-1 at this point.
Huge surprise there for me, and that their only loss is a 6-2 loss against the Sabres, which is even more shocking. But yeah, like you said, they're a fast team, super young, and they're loaded with forwards. They picked forwards in like the past 6 drafts in the first round, so they're finally reaping the benefits of that. With Talbot in net, he's stopping enough pucks to where these forwards can score 2-3 goals a night and still come away with a W.
With the exception of that 6-2 loss.
Right.
But yeah, and you mentioned forwards. Obviously, none more famous right now in the entire league than Connor McDavid, and he just continues to dazzle everyone, Jaden.
Yeah, Connor McDavid, he added an assist last night, and that assist gave him 11 points on the year, which is league leading. And Benoit Pouliot added 2 goals on the night. So, if McDavid can continue with a point a night and people can rally around him, the Oilers might make a playoff push this year.
Yeah, that Taylor Hall for Adam Larson trade isn't looking awful right now, but they might miss a guy like Hall when they do reach the playoffs. I believe they will this season, but you miss that veteran leadership. You have Nugent Hopkins and McDavid and Eberle, but Hall is a guy that is insanely fast on the ice, and they need a guy like that in the playoffs. I mean, they have McDavid, but the experience factor is something that we can't underestimate.
Yeah, definitely. And our last topic for the Eastern Conference is Sidney Crosby. He's going to be coming back after concussion protocol. Penguins, they're always a playoff contending team. Maybe not the one that we're used to seeing last year, but how important is it for Sidney Crosby to come back and play like the Sid the Kid we've always seen?
Yeah, they're the Penguins are sitting around 500 right now. Game or two below or above. But, Sid's back, and we know that the Penguins are going to be there in the end. They'll be a playoff team, and they very well could be a Stanley Cup team again. But in his first game back, Crosby was doing Crosby things, and, the Penguins are winning.
Yep. Anything would not surprise me with the Penguins. Last year, their bottom 6 was filled with guys that belong in the AHL. Kevin Porter won a cup with them. So it's a matter of Crosby coming back and producing at the level that he normally does, and playing with Malkin, seeing if he can get back to his normal levels as well.
Yeah. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the NHL segment. A lot of topics to look out for the next week as well. Keep following the Sabres and the Canadiens and the Oilers as well to see if they can keep their win streaks going. But we're going to segue over to the NFL, and it is just a rough go. For me and Mitch, at least. I know Michael Crabtree is just carrying Jaden's Raiders squad over here. But
things are good in Oakland.
yeah, but for the Bills, LaShawn McCoy is down again with a hamstring injury. And before we talk about anything else, I just got to say I disagree with what Rex Ryan did. He has a lingering hamstring injury, and those do not go away easily for a running back. Gillislee's not a bad runner. Do you guys disagree with what he did as well? Like, he should have just started Gillislee and let McCoy get healthy for the Patriots coming this week.
I completely agree. I was there in Miami for the game. It was a rough one to watch because you could tell that Shady was a step behind, and when he's not as quick as he usually is, it takes away everything that he has. And they saw it with Gillislee. His first carry came in the third quarter, a 20-yard run. So you figure if he plays the entire game and McCoy just sits this one out, gets healthy for the New England game, maybe the Bills take a W in Miami, and LaShawn is definitely healthy for New England.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys that Shady McCoy shouldn't have started that game. That's very easy to say now that the Bills lost and now that Shady was pulled in the third quarter, because that was a huge game for the Bills. They needed to win that one, and for Rex Ryan, it's hard to go into that game with Michael Gillislee as your starter. That's hard to do, especially when you have Shady. But I mean, we don't know what Shady was saying to Rex Ryan. He may have been pushing to be in that starting lineup, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to affect them in this Patriots game, and we'll see if Shady is going to be back to Shady form.
Yeah, to touch on what you just said, Jaden, it's definitely going to affect him because playing and then hurting it even more, having it linger on even further going into the second half. Now Gillislee's out there the whole time. So now that's lingering into this game, and he didn't practice yesterday. So it's just going to keep on affecting him until he gets full rest. And like you said, Mitch, with him not being, fully healthy, even if he is just a step or two off, the Dolphins' defensive line with Wake, Sue, and Williams, who really showed up against Buffalo, they feasted on that. They were comfortable with the Bills not running, and they were all over Tyrod.
Yeah, and I think Tyrod is a bigger story than McCoy. They had a stat after the game. Quarters 1 through 3 in Tyrod's career. A quarterback rating of 75.3. That's 5th in the NFL. In quarter number 4, 24.9. So that's 29th in the NFL. And this is a guy that is playing with a depleted receiver core right now, but that's his entire tenure with the Bills. He's just not good in the fourth quarter. And if you're going to pay him $27 million next year, you need him to throw. You can't pay a quarterback who can't throw, and right now that's what Tyrod Taylor is. He's a subpar quarterback, but he's a great athlete, and he's getting by on that for now, but we'll see when it's time to sign that paycheck if the Bills are completely comfortable with that.
And that's one of the only Bills fans I've heard that doesn't have high praise for Tyrod Taylor. Austin, you were talking about that defensive line of Miami. How about their offensive line? These past 2 games, Jay Ajayi's put up 200 yards rushing, and they have just been dominating. Laramie Tunsil looks like a blessing in disguise that he dropped to them. Mm-hmm. And I think last game the Buffalo Bills missed the most was Marcel Darius because they just dominated that defensive line.
That's right. And you mentioned Laramie Tunsil with him falling in the draft because of that rather funny picture you posted. But, he definitely matured. He showed up to work. Everyone in the Dolphins loves his work ethic. He loves how mature he is now. Going through training camp and coming into this point of the season. Yeah, Jay Ajayi, I don't think the Bills lost to the Miami Dolphins. I think they lost to the Miami Jay Ajayis. So,
I mean,
Tannehill did not play bad that game. In his credit, he did not play bad.
And I think that the offensive line deserves a nice meal from Jay Ajayi because they are opening up holes the size of Mack trucks for him, and that caused Arian Foster to retire. Ajayi's been so good the last 2 weeks. Arian Foster just said, "I'm never going to play again."
He did have some health issues that equated to that, but it definitely didn't help how well Jay Ajayi's been playing.
Absolutely. And to mention, he offered to take him out to dinner after that first 200-yard game.
Yep.
And they said, "Whoa, slow your roll, kid. It was only one game." But, having it happen twice in a row, and maybe it could happen in the future. We'll see. But the only person to ever do it twice in a row 2 separate times was OJ.
Yep.
So,
and the last one to do it, I believe, was Ricky Williams in 2003 for the Dolphins as well.
Yep.
So,
which was his only Pro Bowl season in the NFL.
And one of those games was also one of the games he did it twice in a row was also against Buffalo. So yay. We're gonna go over to Oakland. I'm gonna humor Jaden a little bit. Derek Carr, great arm. I mean, I think he's better than David Carr. In terms of arm strength.
I would hope so.
In terms of arm strength, David Carr didn't have the strongest arm in the world, but how great is it to have Cooper and Crabtree and Derek Carr, who's not immobile. He can move out of the pocket.
No, Derek Carr can move. I think he is very similar to an Aaron Rodgers. They can get out of the pocket. They can run. If he needs to run for a first down, he will. He's not afraid to take a hit. But also he can throw on the run. He's done it to Crabtree all season. Michael Crabtree has 6 touchdowns so far this season. While Amari Cooper only has 1 receiving touchdown, he does have by far the most yards on that team. So they have a strong 1-2. And then when it comes to the red zone, Michael Crabtree is by far their number 1 target, and he's just killing it this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the big story with the Raiders, however, their offense is playing great, but the defense has been a little less than stellar. And if they played like they did last year, I think the Raiders would be in an even better spot right now. But Khalil Mack has showed up at times. He's probably getting double teamed on most of the snaps, but they drafted Carl Joseph in the first round. He hasn't done a whole lot, but I'm gonna look to see if that Raiders defense progresses over time.
Yeah,
the Raiders defense has to play better. There's no question about that, as they rank pretty far down in the league. But a lot of people are looking at the box score with how many they're allowing a game. a stat that not a lot of people know is the Raiders are 4th in takeaways this season, and they're number 1 in third down stops. So those are 2 pretty big categories. So I mean, if you can overlook how much they allow a game, which kind of grand scheme of things, the defense is playing decent at this point, and they demoralized Blake Bortles this past week.
Yeah, and with the exception of the Chargers, you got the Raiders are still a good team. They're above 500. They're doing really well to start.
5-2.
Yeah, you also got the Broncos 5-2. You also got the Chiefs. Guess what? 5-2. So
5-2 or 4-3, one of those.
Yeah.
I believe the Chiefs are.
Are they 4-3?
Yeah.
Okay, so they did
But
drop.
still,
They did drop this past week. So you got 3 teams over 500, and they're all within a game of each other.
Yep.
That's such a tough division. So what do the Raiders need to do to capitalize on opportunities to take advantage of a Broncos team that no longer has C.J. Anderson and is still relying on Trevor Siemian, who's kind of come back down to earth the past couple weeks?
Yeah, I was just about to say the Broncos are 5-2 right now, but Trevor Siemian doesn't have anywhere to hide. That defense is playing it's lights out right now for Von Miller and that defense and those defensive backs, Chris Harris and Aqib Talib. But it's a big story with Siemian because I don't think that he's a guy that you can rely on, and he won't have C.J. Anderson as a blanket. Demaryius Thomas isn't playing up to his potential. So we'll see what the offense does, but that defense is what's going to carry Denver if they're going anywhere.
Yeah, the Raiders have the Bucks this week, and I believe they play the Texans. Then they're on a bye, and they have a big primetime game against the Broncos. So if the Raiders' offense can keep playing the way they are, and if the defense can step up, hopefully they can get the win against the Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to look too far ahead, but you got to think that the Bucks and Texans, you gotta have those ones secured.
It's got to be wins. I mean, the Texans is going to be a tough game, but you have to beat the Bucks.
Absolutely. I mean, Aqib Talib just showed up. He's showed up all season, and I think he's got a really good matchup with DeAndre Hopkins, who Brock Osweiler as a quarterback cannot throw the ball right now. He is just totally non-existent once he gets into the red zone. It's just field goal after field goal for the Texans. So if the Raiders can stop him in the red zone, then I think they got a good shot to win out the next 2 weeks going into the bye week.
Yeah, and tonight we're going to start Week 8. We have the Jags versus the Titans. I don't know how many people are going to tune into that game. It's certainly not my game of the week. But Mitch, what's your game of the week?
My game of the week is Falcons-Packers, a Falcons team that started off the season 4-0 and is now 4-3. Matt Ryan sort of falling back down to earth, but that team is electric on offense with Freeman and Coleman at running back, Jones on the outside. I think they're going to right the ship here and beat a Packers team that's seen Aaron Rodgers struggle so far. He did bounce back last week, but we'll see.
Is that in the Georgia Dome or in Lambeau?
That I am not sure of. I believe that it's in the Dome. Double check here.
All right. Well, while you're checking on that, I'm gonna say the Falcons are doing great, and I mean Coleman has been great, but he's gonna be out this week, or he's at least doubtful. I don't know if he's gonna play this week. But Freeman is still a very good runner. He's a top tier running back, top 7 in the league, if in terms of fantasy, as well as just his impact. He can run, he can block. Julio is Julio. The Green Bay's defense hasn't been stellar. Clay Matthews is back, and they got a good pass rush. But their secondary with Clinton Dix, he's not living up to his potential. And I think the Falcons, if they can pass the ball, if they can move the ball down the field through the air, I think they got a good shot against Green Bay.
Yeah, that game is in the Dome, so we will see Matt Ryan airing it out and Freeman probably getting the bulk of the carries in that one.
Yep. What do you have for the score of that game, Mitch?
I've got the Falcons taking this one. Probably a close, high-scoring game, 28-24 Falcons.
That's a fair prediction you have there.
Yeah, I'm gonna say high scoring and close as well, but I don't think they're gonna be in the 30s. I think Matt Bryant is gonna redeem himself, and he's gonna kick a last-second field goal, and the Falcons are gonna win 38-35.
See, I see the Falcons as doing what they have in the past years, where they start very hot, 4-1, 5-1, and then just start to drop games. And I can see them being around an 8-8 team at the end of the season, which probably would be good enough to win that division still, because that is an awful division. But I think the Packers are going to win this game. I think it's going to be more like a 31-20, and I don't think the Falcons are going to come to play in this one.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to Jaden in our league. We have a friend named Cordell in our league, and he is so high on Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers in terms of fantasy has been, only okay. So he keeps telling me, I'm not gonna start Rodgers against the Falcons. The Falcons are gonna win that game. And I'm like, you watch, man. you're going to sit Rodgers, and that's the game he's going to put up 32 on your bench.
Yeah, Rodgers is a tough player to sit. Any given week, he can just pop off. That's how talented that guy is.
That's right. So, Jaden, what do you got for this week as the game to watch?
It's going to be 2 weeks in a row for me that I have the Philadelphia Eagles as my game of the week, but it's going to be a good one. So I have the 4-2 Eagles at the 5-1 Cowboys. Big storyline for this one is the rookie quarterback, Carson Wentz versus Dak Prescott. And the biggest thing that I like about this matchup is I think NFC East football's back. We've seen in the past couple of years that they've been on the decline with the Cowboys not being so good, the Eagles.
Kirk Cousins won the division.
Kirk Cousins won the division last year, so that doesn't say something to you. I don't know what it does. But I'm excited for this one. It's a primetime game, Sunday Night Football. And, I frankly, I don't know who I have in this one. It's going to be a very good game, but in the end of things, I think Philly's going to come and win this one. It's in AT&T Stadium, so we're going to see if Carson Wentz can handle adversity again. But, I talked pretty down on Carson Wentz last week when I had Minnesota beating them. And Carson Wentz came in, and he beat Minnesota. So I think he's going to do the same thing to Dallas, but we'll see.
Eagles' defense is doing pretty well in terms of pass rush, so I think it is important for them to get Dak Prescott out of the pocket. But I'm going to have the Cowboys winning that one. I think Ezekiel Elliott is too good to stop. He's just incredible. He's the second best running back right now behind J.J. I'm just saying, like, right now. Over the course of the season, you can make the argument that Elliott's just been the best all season, and I'll totally support that.
Does lead the league in rushing.
That's right. But Prescott, with him running one way, Elliott running the other way, they can really do some damage with that offense. They got Des Bryant coming back. We'll see how effective he is coming back from that stress fracture. But I'm gonna take the Cowboys in that one. It'll be a good game. I think Wentz can still throw the ball. I think the Eagles can move the ball. They're doing some pretty great things, some creative things with that offense. I'm gonna say it'll be about a 28-21 Cowboys win in Jerry World.
Yeah, I think it's great that NFC East football is back because we do see a lot of it here in Western New York. The CBS networks pick that up quite a bit. We see the Giants and Cowboys, what seems like 100 times a year, but I think the Cowboys are not to be messed with this year. I think they're a real force in the league, and Wentz has sort of fallen back to earth after a stellar start. And Peterson there in Philadelphia has designed game plans that have allowed him to throw a lot of short passes, and he's making those passes very well, but throwing downfield has been an issue for Wentz. Like you said, Elliott has been amazing this season behind that great offensive line. With Romo coming back soon, I think Prescott puts up another good game and holds onto the ball enough to where the Cowboys can take this one. Probably close. I'm going to say 21-14 Cowboys.
All right. And to go back to what you said about Carson Wentz, Minnesota does have a great defense, and I think that's going to be, if anything for Carson, I think that will be a good test for this coming week against Cowboys defense, who's definitely not Minnesota's. We'll see if he can just limit the turnovers. I mean, him and Bradford both were pretty sloppy in that first half of that game, but if they can limit the turnovers, and the Eagles do have a shot, but I'm going to go with the Cowboys. Right. So my game of the week, to cap off this segment, is going to be Seattle in New Orleans. It's going to be really, really good game. New Orleans has no defense. Seattle has plenty of defense. Seattle has a very mediocre offense right now, and New Orleans has a lot of offense right now. So it's just going to be a really good balance. It's going to be, whose strength is going to outshine the other one. Maybe this is the game where Russell Wilson just says, I'm going to air it out to Graham. I'm going to air it out to Wilson. Or not Wilson. Wilson's going to air it out to Baldwin. Yep. He'll air it out to maybe Tyler Lockett. He's got quick receivers who can go down the field. Drew Brees has guys, obviously, like Colby Fleener, red zone target, Brandon Cooks going down the field. I think it's going to be a high-passing game, and if Drew Brees can do Drew Brees things and find holes in that Seattle Legion of Boom, which he's one of the smartest quarterbacks in the league behind Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, he can do anything he wants with the ball. I think it'll be another one of those high-scoring, exciting football games. It'll be a really good game. I think the Saints are going to come out on top and shock people and take a home win. Take a home win in this one and overcome the Seahawks defense. I think they're going to win 42-31.
It's a high-scoring matchup you got there. But, I agree with pretty much everything you said there. I have New Orleans winning this game. Pretty much every time you have New Orleans in their home stadium, they're going to put up points, as you predicted with that 42. But Seattle's definitely missing their running game here. They lost Marshawn Lynch, and and they don't have Thomas Rawls extended period of time. So it just shows how big a running game is in this league. If you don't have a running game, that's going to strongly impact your passing game, and that's what you're seeing in Seattle right now.
Right, I agree with Austin and Jaden here. I think that the Saints are going to come out on top. I don't think the running game has been that poor for Seattle. It's just that their offense as a whole has been shaky. And without Lynch, he was one of those guys where you could rely on him play after play. And Christian Michael is having a good season, but he's not putting up Marshawn Lynch numbers. And I think Drew Brees at home, there's three things in life: death, taxes, and starting Drew Brees at home in the fantasy league. So I think that New Orleans takes this one, and I think that Seattle is severely overrated. They lose again, and I'm going to go with the Saints 28-10.
With that one, I'll go 28-10. Wow. I'm going to say 28.
You pretty much just cut my score in half.
28-27 New Orleans. I think it'll be
a close one?
I think it'll be a close one, but yeah.
Yeah, the thing about the Seahawks running game is it hasn't been that great all year. Christine Michaels got flashes, but when you're facing Breeze at home, he's going to put points on the board. It could very easily be 14-0 in the blink of an eye with the Saints leading. So now you're forced to keep throwing and to keep trying to keep. That's basically what it is. You're trying to play catch up, trying to play keep up with the New Orleans offense when they're at home.
We'll see what their defense can do.
Exactly. Before we wrap up NFL, how's you guys' fantasy season so far? We touched on C.J. Anderson. I'm kind of crying myself to sleep in two of my leagues. I'm not very happy right now. I'm extremely worried. One of the guys in one league beat me to the punch with Devontae Booker, but I was able to scoop him up in another league. But it doesn't look great for me right now.
It's looking pretty good for me. I pulled out another win last week thanks to a strong performance by Mike Evans in my flex. Evans is having an on and off year, but he's one of those guys in Tampa that you can rely on as a wide receiver 2 or a flex. Waiver wire pickup for me this week. I'm going to go with Ty Montgomery, the Packers. He's been targeted a lot the last 2 weeks after not receiving one target in the first 4 weeks. So we'll see what he can do. He's playing a little running back with Shields and Lacey out, but Niall Davis is working his way into the offense.
It's tough for me with Green Bay's receivers because they have a Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams, who went off last week, and then Ty Montgomery. So you just never know what you're going to get from those positions each week. But I'll talk about my main league. Sitting 5-1 going into this past week. I lost, so I'm 5-2. I lost 140 to 139. So a close game, and it was Demarius' stat line on that game. That's what it came down to, was Demarius Thomas. His stat line was 6 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown. And so we were tied at 139 at that point. And then at some point they fixed the stat and gave him 6 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown. Them giving him that yard and putting it to 40 gave him an extra point, which resulted in me losing. So essentially I lost off of a fixed stat.
That is...
And, yeah, it was tough.
That is the worst. That's happened to me a couple times, and it's just tough. And in my main league, I lost this week because Devontae Booker got a red zone touchdown, and C.J. Anderson he also got one. But if that one had gone to Anderson, I would have won by... We do half-point PPR. Half-point receptions instead of full point. So I would have won by 1.5 points if Anderson had gotten that extra touchdown and Booker did not. So I was pretty upset with that one.
Now fantasy's got me bitter. So what do you say we move on to NBA now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna in the NFL segment, we're gonna transition over to NBA. Tip-off is starting up, and we're lucky to have my good friend and NBA correspondent here, Kenny Stables. Kenny, how you doing today?
Doing all right. How are you guys?
Doing all right. Now, you being such an NBA guy, I mean, we all are, but you more so than most people I've ever met. I'm sorry you're a Heat fan.
It's okay. I only cry sometimes when I'm not on the team anymore.
That's right.
You're 1-0. It's okay.
It's all right.
It's all right. So what's your takeaway from opening week?
Well, just give me a team and I'll give you what you want.
Well, I think we're all going to be curious to see how the Warriors are going to bounce back.
I feel like the Warriors, people tend to overreact early in the season in any sport, but especially the NBA. If they're not clicking on all cylinders, then everyone writes off a team like the Warriors against the Spurs. The Spurs are probably the worst team to play opening night. If you're any NBA team, I mean, they're probably one of the best defensive team in the NBA. They don't make mistakes. They make you make mistakes, and they capitalize off it. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're the Warriors, you need a team that's a little more undisciplined, a younger team like the Pelicans or the Rockets even, to play in your first game in that Western Conference. I mean, God, I would never want to play the Spurs. The first game of the year. I mean, it makes the Warriors look worse than they really are. They're still probably going to be the 1 seed in the West when it's all said and done.
Yeah, you mentioned how good the Spurs defense are. So does that say how good the Warriors offense is that they're able to put up 100 on a team that routinely only gives up 85?
I do.
Or...
I think it's both sides. I do think it's a little bit of the first week theory where, defense, you tend to see more 100-point games in the first week of the season because teams are a little more rusty or they're not rotating as much. They're a little more lethargic. I mean, that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I think another thing with the Warriors, we saw it with the Heat, and you're a Heat fan, you can attest to this. When LeBron first came down there, they were shaky at first, and it's going to be a little bit of that with Durant. There's not enough basketballs to go around in Golden State. You've got Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, KD. Everybody wants their shots. They're going to have to find a way to make it work.
And to mention Klay Thompson, it's funny, Charles Barkley came out and said earlier this week that he thinks Klay Thompson, other than LeBron James, Klay Thompson is the best all-around player in terms of shooting, defense, and driving. And I disagree with that statement.
I think Charles Barkley likes his attention in the media. So he said a lot of things that I disagree with, and I think most NBA experts for the media outlets would disagree with as well.
I think, Thompson's a guy who's very consistent for them. But to say he's up at the top of the league, I think is an extreme overstatement.
Let's be honest. He's an elite shooter. He's a good passer. He's great on offense. He's good off the ball. He comes off screens very well. Defensively, he's no Tony Allen. He's no Jimmy Butler at the 2 position.
No.
He's I know Butler's playing the 3, but you could still consider him a 2 if you want.
He's less than athletic, and he found an offense that works for him, and
it
that's
fits
the
him
position
perfectly.
that Curry is in as well. I think Curry would still be Curry with another team, but with the Warriors' offense running as well as it does, it just takes him to another level.
And of course, if an offense runs through you, it makes you look better than you really are. And I think Klay Thompson, if you put him on any other team, he's still a great player, but he's not to the extent of which we usually talk about.
Right, and another guy that's like that I wanted to hear your opinion on is Kyle Lowry, putting up huge numbers in Toronto. And he's a guy that my Knicks have been talking about bringing on board for a long time now, but I'm not sure about him yet.
Well, Kyle Lowry is an interesting case. He came to the league from Villanova. Villanova, of course, is known for getting very hard-nosed guards, hard-nosed, tough inner-city kids, much like Temple. It's those Philly schools that, they love to pride themselves on defense and forcing turnovers and really battling your way, making your free throws in transition, even like drawing fouls in transition. Kyle Lowry has evolved more so than most NBA players in the league over the past 3 or 4 years. He started out struggling with the Rockets and the Grizzlies, and then he goes to the Raptors, and he's this elite perennial all-star point guard. He can shoot threes now. He's better running the pick and roll. He's lost weight. He's a little overweight when he came to the league, especially look up when he was with the Grizzlies. I mean, he packed on some pounds when he was with Memphis.
Yeah, he was looking like Zach Randolph.
Yeah, well, Zach Randolph, he can't jump 2 feet off the ground, or 2 inches off the ground, but he's got girth, and that's why he's one of the leading rebounders in the NBA for the past 6-7 years.
And it helps when, in the opener, DeMar DeRozan put up 40 points. So when you have that star alongside, it's hard to fail.
Watch out for the Raptors this year. They're my 3 seed this year in the East. I think it's going to go Cavs number 1, Celtics 2, with Brad Stevens getting the most out of role players on the Celtics. I mean, not to talk bad about the Celtics saying they're role players, but Jay Crowder, Avery Bradley, not Gordon Hayward, but especially Crowder and Bradley, they're not all-stars per se, but they're good players you'd like to have on a team, but he gets the most out of them in that system where it's a lot of off-ball movement, a lot of screens, driving to the paint, kickouts. It's just basic basketball, and it really gets the most. It kind of levels the playing field if you think about it, if you run a very basic system.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what he's doing over there in Boston is what Pop's been doing for a while with San Antonio, having point guards like Tony Parker drive in, and if he's got a lane, he'll take it. Otherwise, he can kick out to big men on the mid-range games. You got Kawhi Leonard out there who can just play all over the place. And to go back to the Spurs for a little bit, just because they did come out on all cylinders.
Right.
LaMarcus Aldridge, I'm telling you, he's gonna have a year.
He is, and especially with the retirement of Tim Duncan, he's gonna have an increased role. I think his first year last year with the Spurs, he was kind of learning the system a little bit, playing alongside Tim Duncan, spelling him here and there in the second quarter and late into the third. But if you think about LaMarcus Aldridge, he's kind of set the way. He wasn't the one who did it. I think Dirk was the one who kind of made big men shooting threes a big thing in the NBA. But LaMarcus Aldridge shoots threes now. DeMarcus Cousins can shoot threes now. Even Joel Embiid attempted the 3. He made a 3 last night for the 76ers. In college, he lived in the paint. So, I'm very, very intrigued to see what the Sixers are going to do with Joel Embiid and Jahlil Okafor, at least giving him playing time at the 5. But I love Joel Embiid. I watched him play at Kansas a lot. he was a dominant force. He played volleyball and soccer when he was living in Cameroon. I mean, this guy has amazing footwork, amazing hands. A few years down the line, he might be an all-star center in this league.
I literally just noticed this. Jaden, you're wearing a 76ers sweater.
Yeah, I see Austin giving me all sorts of looks right now. I'm just wearing this, nice little Philly Sixers sweater. I am by no means a Philadelphia 76ers fan. I'm just a sports fan.
Right.
It's a
Absolutely.
nice looking
Oh, yeah,
sweater.
no, it's a good-looking
It's a nice
sweater.
looking
Yeah,
sweater.
it's
So
classic.
I picked it up. It's a classic, but by no means I'm not a Sixers fan.
Okay.
Don't spread that around.
Well,
But-
you gave a nice big smile when he talked about Joel Embiid. I was like, okay, so you're a Sixers fan. That's
He
interesting.
hasn't played in 2 years. He put up 20 last night. What's not to
He's
smile about?
he's a great guy. He's funny on social media. Fans love him. He's funny. I mean, what's
doing-
not to like about him?
He's doing the juju on the beat before the
Right.
game.
Yeah.
I'm going to touch back on the Celtics here.
Right.
They are bringing a new meaning to draft and develop. That was their strategy. They tore that team down, building up through the draft now, but touching on big men who can shoot. A guy
Right.
that's working in that system, Jonas Jerebko, a former
Oh.
Detroit Piston, a great three-point
First-round draft
shooter.
pick, yeah, from Detroit.
Former first-round pick, you're right. And this is a guy who really hasn't done much in his career, but with Boston, Stevens is getting the most out of him.
Well, that's what Stevens does. He takes guys who are role players predominantly. He makes them look better than they are. And in some cases, in most cases, they are legitimate players. But he knows what he's doing out there. I think he's the youngest coach in the NBA as we speak. He might be the second youngest, but he's definitely one of the youngest. And at Butler, he had guys like Sheldon Mack and Gordon Hayward. I mean, they were by no means superstars in college, but they put up numbers when they were at Butler. They got to a Final Four and a national championship 2 years in a row.
Yeah, he's a very good developing coach, and obviously you saw it happen with a relatively smaller program in Butler. I mean, Butler's not Kentucky. They're not Cuse. They're not Duke. They're not North Carolina.
they always find a way to win.
always find a way to get in the Final Four for that stretch at least. So, but we know that Brad Stevens is a good developing coach. I was just curious to see how that would translate into the NBA, and obviously it's working wonders.
I'm honestly surprised that it's worked in the NBA. I feel like the parity is more so in the NBA, obviously more so in college basketball. But it's taken Brad Stevens, I'd say, a solid year to really entrench himself as a solid coach in the NBA. I'd love him to coach my team.
Yeah, you see that a lot. College coaches not having a ton of success at the NBA level. You saw it with Rick Pitino, Jeff Van
John
Gundy, Calipari. Yeah, and that's a reason why Coach Cal and Coach K are not coming to the NBA level, because they realize
not?
it's a whole different
Yeah,
game. Why would you leave a program where you're having so much success?
and
When
also they're paying you good money to
Right.
stay
Oh,
at
right,
Duke and
exactly.
Kentucky. You're making good money.
If you're at the upper echelon at your level, why risk it?
Exactly.
I mean, you've made a living for yourself doing this.
I wanted to ask you one last thing on the NBA.
Go for it.
My Knickerbockers.
Yeah.
They got killed in the opener, but
They
they're
did.
playing the
LeBron had a
Cavs.
They did.
triple-double.
LeBron has
It's-
a triple-double. Kyrie puts over 30. The so-called dream team, Derrick Rose needs to shut it
I'm
down.
sorry, I never understood the dream team label with the
Right.
Knicks. I thought they were a solid. They're a good 500 team. They'll probably make the playoffs, and they'll be like a 6th seed in the East this year.
No, they had a good first half. They held their own against the Cavs, but then you want to know what happened in the second half? Rose and Anthony combined for 3 of 15 in the second half.
Right, and Porzingis was 3 for 9 in the first half, I believe. So it's a guy who really needs to step it up, and Anthony's a guy that wants as many touches as he can get, and Rose is the same way. Porzingis needs his touches. It's a young guy who needs to get in a
He does.
rhythm early.
Young players need playing time to develop in any sport. You can't get better by sitting on the bench. As far as the Knicks go, I'm very concerned as to how they're going to get the touches. Is Derrick Rose going to drive on pick and rolls? Are they going to let Porzingis run at the top? Is Anthony going to get 3 out of 5 possessions? How are they going to divvy it up? Well, I guess we're not going to find out until
Yeah, time's going to tell.
it
They've
is.
been
It's only 2 games.
They've been looking for a point guard for quite some time now, and Lowry is a guy that I brought up earlier. But Rambis is a coach who doesn't seem to take to any point guards that come in. You saw with Jimmer Fredette last year.
No.
Came in and
Yeah.
played 2 minutes, hit his first 3, and never saw the court again.
No.
So Rambis is a guy who isn't fond of guys who are just going to come out there and score.
No, Kurt Rambis was a longtime NBA big man for a while, I believe in the late 70s, early 80s. And he's obviously loves center. So, I mean, when you have coaches who tailor to a certain position, it kind of makes for some biased play calling. And that's where conflict stirs.
Yep.
I think that's a perfect segue right there, since we're talking about the Knicks and the Cavs, to stay in Cleveland. And we're going to go over to the big finale of this show, is the MLB postseason, the World Series. This is my favorite time of year, not just with the World Series, but look at what we got. We got all 4 major sports in full swing at this point, and it's just great to talk about. But obviously, me being a baseball fan, love talking about the World Series. They're split at 1 now. It's pretty pretty interesting. We know Corey Kluber and John Lester was going to be. We knew that was going to be a huge pitching matchup, and Kluber got the better end of that deal. What did you guys see from Game 1?
Game 1 was a tough one for me. I was sort of pulling for the Indians because I've been vouching for their pitching staff. But if it wasn't for Schwarber missing a home run by about a foot, I think the Cubs could have taken that Game 1.
Yeah, that home run would have made it an interesting game, and
Right.
it was still either only 2-0 or 3-0 at that point.
Right.
But either way, you close that gap, and you maybe you just
swing
don't know. Yeah, it's a momentum swing. You just don't know.
Kyle Schwarber, is it safe to say he's got to be the talk of this World Series so far?
Absolutely.
I mean, just last week, this guy was in the Arizona Fall League alongside Tim Tebow. And now just so far in the World Series, he's batting .429, and he's brought in 2 RBIs. And he was very close to that home run, which would have reeled in more.
He's a guy that strikes out a lot, but he's swinging for the fences, and if he connects, that ball is not touching the ground anytime soon.
And it,
The one he hit off of Segrist against the Cardinals last year.
Right.
That one
Wow.
that one just landed yesterday.
yeah, the one that landed on the scoreboard.
Yep.
You're talking about,
Yeah.
Landed
That one
just after Bryce Harper's 500-foot home run in high school.
Yeah, seriously. But to go off Schwarber, what do you guys think? Well, first of all, let's talk about Game 2, Cubs. It was all Cubs. Game 1 was all Indians. The score made it seem like more of a blowout than it actually was because the Cubs were in it for a little bit, but the Indians ran away with it. Then Game 2, total 180. It was all Cubs from the beginning, with Jake Arrieta having a no-hitter going through 5 1/3.
Yeah, Arrieta was great, and then you have a guy like Chapman come in and shut it down, and that's what the Cubs need. They need to score runs early and then get that bullpen fired up.
Yeah.
And Arrieta, reigning Cy Young winner, just pitched lights out. But like you were saying, Yankees are really missing their oldest Chapman. This guy was absolutely throwing gas last night. With their first batter, he rung in at 102 miles per hour. Then their second batter camp was Coco Crisp. On that ground out, 104 miles per hour was Chapman's fastball. And then just to add, filthy off-speed pitches in the high 80s. Like, how do you keep up with
That
that?
89 slider. I
Yeah,
remember I
he's
saw
throwing a
that.
slider at
he's
89.
unhittable.
He's throwing
Oh,
a
man.
fastball at 104. Like, that's literally unhittable.
It really is. It's hard enough to see it make any kind of contact whatsoever. Plus, it was raining, and you're battling the elements. Just good luck. He could honestly elevate 104 up above the belt on anyone. It's just
You're
impossible.
basically just swinging and praying that you make contact.
Yeah. And now we go over to we go over to Chicago
Yep.
for games 3 through 5, with the American League winning the All-Star game and getting 1, 2, 6, and 7, if it goes 7. So games 3 through 5, no DH in Chicago. What do you guys do if you're Joe Madden with Kyle Schwarber? You gotta find a way to keep him in the lineup, especially with Soler and Hayward being very subpar. But is he ready to play defense?
Hayward is great on defense, less than great, to put it mildly, at the plate.
Batting
But
071 this postseason.
Schwarber is an extreme liability in the field. That guy struggles to play in the outfield, and I think he's a guy that you need at the plate, but with no DH, where do you put him? He's not going to hide in the World Series.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know if you feed him into the lineup there. I mean, you saw early in this season that Dexter Fowler took him out, and then he tore his ACL. So, I mean, giving him, you're not doing too much running when you're up at the plate. Obviously, you're on the bases, but you're really on your tail when you're in the outfield. And coming back from the ACL injury, that's got to be a little scary for Joe Madden and the Cubs.
Yeah. We still got Kenny with us. Obviously, he's our NBA correspondent, but he dabbles a little bit with baseball as well.
A little
A little bit. So now, if you're Joe Madden, we got our points of view on it. So what do you think? He got injured in the outfield before the season started,
Well,
so you can't really. Are you reluctant to put him out there again?
Right, that's what I was just going to bring up. That's the very position where he tore his ACL and LCL in his leg and caused him to miss the whole season. I mean, he's it's like the Andre Ethier effect. You miss the whole year and you come back and you try to make some sort of effort for a playoff team. And with the Dodgers, obviously, they weren't really relying on Ethier that much. But with Schwarber, he's going to have a huge role. Now, especially now that he's batting .429 in the World Series. I mean, Joe Madden loves to shuffle in left fielders like that. Wilson Contreras has played left field this season. Travis Wood has pitched, gone to left field, and then come back to pitch in left field again. I mean, I don't think Joe Madden cares about defense in left field as much as most managers do. I think he just cares about the bat.
Travis Wood made a really nice catch earlier in the year during that one game where he was.
He did.
He was kind of
But
penciling.
no
He was penciling in Strope in at pitcher, and then and Travis Wood left just kind of flip flopping.
No other manager in baseball would do that. Pedro Strop was a shortstop coming up in the minor leagues, so he's a better athlete than Travis Wood. But but still, who thinks of these things?
But yeah, as good as the Indians pitching staff is, I think it's important for Madden to have those bats in the lineup. You can't afford to send Hayward to the plate when you have Schwarber on your bench.
Do you think maybe it kind of gives Madden a shorter leash on his starting staff? If it's a close situation, maybe Hendricks is slipping a little bit. Maybe for argument's sake here, Hendricks and Tomlin in Game 3 are in a 3-3 battle. It's the 5th inning. You got runners on base. Now Hendricks is coming up. Maybe his pitch count's fine, but now you got a guy like Schwarber off the bench. You can make it 6-3 right there in the 5th inning. So maybe you do have those pieces on the bench to bring them out for key situations.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
In my opinion, that's what I would do. Just keep Schwarber on the bench. I would keep him out of the outfield just to prevent any further injury to the ACL and LCL. Bring him up in a pinch hit situation. It makes the story could add even more. Just bring him off the bench for a pinch hit, and he could have a clutch hit for the Cubs. I could very well see that happen.
With 2 bum knees as well. It could be the next Kirk Gibson.
Very true.
Oh, 86, baby.
Yeah.
Or not 86. Oh, my God. 93? No, that was Joe Carter.
It might have been late 80s. Might have been 80. No, 86 was not.
That was the Mets.
That was the Mets.
93 was Joe Carter.
Yeah, so it was like
It was around that time.
It was like 91.
I was thinking like those highlight moments.
Before our time, safe to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Speaking of that, you have some trivia for us.
I do. Since it is knotted up at 1, and we've seen all Indians and we've seen all Cubs. Now, my trivia question is the trivia question to it is, can you name the previous 7 losers to the World Series? And my trivia fact off of that is, actually, we'll get to that later. Can you name the previous 7 losers dating back to 2009? And I'll give the interesting fact after this.
I'm going to start with 2009. The Yankees taking that one from the Phillies.
Okay. Let's go around. Do you remember 2010, Jade?
I'm pretty bad with history, I must say. And
2010, the Giants beat...
It wasn't even year.
It wasn't even year.
So, okay, well, we know for a given
yeah.
the Giants won in 2010, 2012, and 2014.
That's correct.
So,
who did they beat in those years?
2010. I know, obviously, last year the Mets lost.
Mm-hmm.
So, we got the Mets and the Phillies, 09 and 2015 taken care of. Now it's just 2010 and 2014. And the Giants are in 3 of those.
Wait, hold on a second. What did you say? 2012?
He said 2015 when the Royals
beat
the Mets.
2015.
Yeah, I said we got rid of 09 and 2015.
Yeah, that's right.
This is tough.
Well, I will say this. At one point during that stretch, the Rangers were in 2 straight World Series and lost both of them.
That's 2010, 2011.
That's 2010, 2011.
They lost to the Giants in 10, in 11, the Cardinals.
Yep.
David Freese was the World Series MVP.
That's right.
So we got 09, we got 2010, we got 2011, we're back to 2012. So the
Giants
were
were
there.
Giants.
And in 2014, the Giants were there also.
That's right.
So
in 2012, Pablo Sandoval hit 3 home runs off of Verlander.
Yeah, they're playing the Tigers.
It was the Tigers.
All right.
Wow.
Off of Verlander. That's
and
right.
I don't think we have seen the same Verlander since
2013, in just after spring training ended in 2013, you had the Boston Marathon and the Boston bombing. So what propelled the Red Sox?
Red Sox.
That's
Who
right.
did they beat
Cardinals.
in 2013? That's right, the Cardinals again.
And we're back to the Giants.
In 2014.
Kansas City.
Royals.
They beat the Royals.
They beat the Royals.
That's correct.
And then
And the Royals got redemption in 2015 and defeated the Mets.
That's correct. So the interesting fact, for all of those World Series losers, they won their respective league championship series first. What I mean by that is the 2 LCSs, the ALCS and the NLCS, whoever won their respective series first and then had to wait for the other one to end would go on to lose that World Series.
So you tell me, if history repeats itself,
If history
the
repeats itself, the
are
Indians
not going to win.
Are in trouble.
Are in
So
trouble.
what I mean by that is that the Indians won in 5 games,
Yep.
and the Cubs won in 6. So since the Indians had to won earlier and then waited, they will theoretically lose. And I think that has a lot to do with, if history repeats itself, if it's a trend, I think that has a lot to do with the bats cooling off. It doesn't affect pitching so much. Pitchers can kind of stay loose in their own way. But if you're not hitting over the course of 3 or 4 days, and then you got to go out there and face a guy like Arrieta who's running fastball is dotting the corner.
Unbelievable.
It's hard to do.
It's plane to plane. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Game 1, the Indians came out and hit. They
did.
put up, so I guess they almost proved that wrong. And then, so since they got that Game 1 win, that's huge for them.
Yeah.
Game 1 winners have won 6 straight World Series. And in the past 28 World Series, Game 1 winners have won 24 of those. So,
It is huge.
So the Indians are looking good if you're going off that Game 1 stat, but then the Cubs take Game 2 and we're tied at 1-1. So where do we go from here?
There are arguments for both sides.
Why don't we take this to another level and bring in a new segment that we've been wanting to try now? Obscure players.
Let's
Go
do that.
around the circle here for about 2 minutes. We'll try to name as many obscure MLB players as we can.
Okay.
in
What's
span.
any more specific criteria? Like,
Well, we're not looking for like Matt DeSalvos who never made it for the Yankees. We're looking for middle of the road guys like say Miguel Cairo.
so I can cross off Chris Bouchek off my list.
Yeah, cross off Chris Bouchek.
We're gonna look for guys that you probably have forgotten about, but guys that'll probably bring back a few good
But played a
memories.
surprise role.
Forgettable
Exactly.
memories that when you say them, you'd be like, oh yeah, I remember him from MLB 03, the Bigs.
Right. I remember
Derek Lee.
when Grady Sizemore couldn't keep his knees healthy for 5 straight years.
I remember when Kyle Blanks was supposed to be the next big thing for the Padres, and he never panned out.
Right.
Oh, that's right.
I remember Jason Isringhausen having a fairly successful stint with the Cards.
I remember Aaron Small for the Yankees one
Oh,
time, starting
wow.
off 10-0.
10-0. And sticking with the Yankees, how about a guy that crashed his Porsche and broke his ribs, Carl Pavano?
Guy did more than just crash.
The human CAT scanner.
Speaking of the AL East, now you're talking about the Yankees. You can't forget the Baltimore's Melvin Mora filling the lineup there.
He played till he was
Mora.
like 43.
Oh
didn't he?
yeah.
Remember when he was on the Rockies?
Yeah.
Alongside Jason Giambi, who went to the Rockies
Yep.
and kind of stuck around there for a little bit.
Rockies love old corner infielders. Andres Galarraga was there until he was like
Andres
39.
Galarraga.
Surprised since they like old people in Colorado. I'm surprised they've never had a stint with Rich Hill.
Oh.
I love Rich
We
Hill.
have to bring Rich Hill into
That's
this.
right. Okay, okay, Mitch, fine. The Dodgers lose. We can throw a party at your house now. Rich Hill does not have to be talked about.
I celebrated already. We can celebrate again. I'm going to keep celebrating because I hope I never see Rich Hill in the MLB again. Career 4.1 ERA. That guy's garbage. He's throwing garbage, and I can't believe anybody can't hit him.
Let's put that in perspective, because he had a sub-4 ERA this year. He was a Cy Young candidate for the Dodgers.
He was. No
what
one
was
talked
it?
about him.
What was he, a 3.3?
He was around there. He never had one. He had one bad start through July. One bad start.
It's a guy that's focused on mechanics, and you have to give him credit for that, but that guy is old as dirt. He's been on almost every team in the league.
I have this
man.
unequivocal love for him just because he dropped his arm angle and throws 8 different types of curveballs.
Right.
And I love it.
It reminds me of El Duque with the Yankees,
Yeah.
who threw everywhere. He could throw submarine like Mike Myers with the Yankees.
I got it.
Another name.
Right.
Well, one fact is that Rich Hill will not be playing in the World Series this year. So let's start with Austin and go around. Who do you have winning the World Series?
I have the Cubs in 6. Corey Kluber's going to go Game 4, but that's
We know that.
But that's the only other game the Indians will win. That matchup, Madden's going to use his full rotation. Francona's going to push guys up a little bit, but it's going to be Lackey versus Kluber. I can chalk that one up right now for a Tribe win. But then the rest of it, Kyle Hendricks, Cy Young candidate this year against Josh Tomlin, who's having a good year. He's having a good year. I think
2-0 in
But he
both
falls-
seasons.
I think he's above his head.
Josh Tomlin this season fell under the fallacy of a lot of pitcher wins, so you assume
Yeah.
he's actually, pitcher
Yeah.
wins aren't, totally irrelevant, but they're not really a quantifier.
They just tell you how much run support you get.
Right.
Looking
Mostly.
back to when last year Nate Eovaldi led the American League in win percentage with an
Right.
ERA almost 5.
Correlation
exactly.
does not always equal causation, especially when talking about wins.
Right.
No, you have to look at other numbers. But if a
Right.
guy has 18, 19 wins with a sub-3 ERA, I don't think you can
Yeah,
dismiss that.
Right.
he's been
Well,
at
that's
least
John
above
Lester.
average.
That's John Lester, right. Pitcher wins they're subjective to a lot of
So to go back to it, I think Hendricks will beat Tomlin. If I'm just kind of planning it out, 2-1 Cubs. Then Kluber taking on Lackey, tied at 2, and then you got to face Lester against what would potentially be Ryan Merritt. Great,
Right.
go Lester in
Maybe.
Chicago. And then if you bring back for Game 6, Arrieta, Bauer. I'm just going to assume that if Francona is going to use Kluber for Game 4 on 3 days rest, he's going to try to plan out to use Kluber
He's
for
gonna
Game
use-
7.
he's going to.
Also on 3 days rest.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to make it to that point. I think it would be Lackey losing to Kluber, but Hendricks winning on Friday, and then Lackey losing to Kluber on Saturday, and then Sunday it would be, Hendricks winning Friday, Lackey losing Saturday, Lester winning Sunday, and then Arrieta back in Chicago against what would either be Trevor Bauer or Josh Tomlin.
And then you think they got on 6?
I think the Cubs got it in 6.
They
Just
got on
going
6.
going out the pitching matchups. I mean, both teams can hit. They both Cleveland runs more Chicago Cubs have more RBIs. They drive in more runs, but I think pitching matchups show the Cubs in 6.
Right. I do agree with everything you said. The Cubs have a much deeper starting rotation. The Indians have the better bullpen. I think the Indians can win in 6 if they can get through 5 or 6 innings while allowing 3 or less runs and scoring at least 2 or 3 in that time span. Because you can just give the ball off to Andrew Miller and he's going to mow down everybody. Yeah. So I think if the Indians can hold it together through 5 innings when Kluber's not on the mound, then they'll win in 6. But like Bauer struggled. He didn't look bad last night. He didn't pitch all that great, but his pitch count was high. Batters were fouling off a lot of balls. It wasn't fun. His body language was horrible on the mound.
All right, so what's your final prediction again?
Indians in 6.
Indians in 6.
Six.
Okay.
I agree with mostly everything you just said there, Kenny. I'm going to have the Indians in 7.
Okay.
Full series.
Full series?
Yeah.
Dude, that speed of the Indians is
Speed and defense.
Speed and
That's
defense.
what they pride on.
It's great to see that.
Even though
the
Kipnis
small
had
ball
2
kind of
errors.
come back into the league. But you got to know of how good Terry Francona is of a World Series manager. Going into Game 2, he's 9-0 as a World Series manager, winning 2 World Series and Boston 04 and 07. He swept both those World Series. Mm-hmm. So he finally earned his first loss in the World Series. But let's see how he'll bounce back. And I'm going to predict that he's going to win in 7, and he's going to become 3-0 in World Series.
That'd be something.
Yeah.
I think you hit on the biggest storyline there, and the biggest point for me is Madden not being as good a manager as Terry Francona is. Francona is a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. And it's no slight on Joe Madden. He's a very good manager, and he took the Rays to new heights when he was there. I just think the Indians have too much pitching. They're maybe not starting pitching. Those matchups
all around.
They favor the Cubs.
Right.
But the bullpen of the Indians has been lights out, and the bats of the Cubs are going to have a tough time keeping up. I've got Indians in 7 as well.
Wow. It's hard to believe that this. Am I the only one with the Cubs?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, what the?
In 6, that is.
Whatever. I just can't believe that this time next week, there's going to be no more meaningful baseball until April. Yeah.
Oh, that is sad.
That's very sad.
And the good thing about it is we won't have to worry about seeing Rich Hill.
Excuse me, Rich Hill is the greatest thing that's ever happened to the game of baseball.
But at least, NHL just started up, NBA just started up, so we'll have plenty more to talk about.
College basketball could be a really good year. The one and done culture is going to be very, very controversial.
Yeah. I hate
we have a lot to look forward to over the winter months as we get into NHL, NBA, and college basketball, college football bracketology with
Playoffs
that aspect.
Up,
Yep, we can talk about that. Lots to look forward to as us being college students for the spring semester. I'm already looking forward to March Madness.
Oh God, yeah. We'll have to do some fun brackets between.
That's gonna be a good time.
Northern Iowa's going to win it all. That's monopoly.
We're bringing
Northern Iowa.
Flashbacks to Ali Farouk-Manesh.
Oh,
Calling
yes.
for Northern Iowa.
Oh, add him on the name game, baby.
Right.
But that's going to do it for this week's installment of the Talon Sports Talk podcast. So until next time, I'm Austin Speaker.
I'm James Fowler. It was a pleasure having you, Kenny.
Thank you very much.
And I'm Mitch Courtney.
All right, we'll see you next week.